He was done losing people. She was done begging for help. But when a desperate mother stumbled onto Caleb Walker's ranch, bleeding and breathless, neither of them knew they just stepped into a storm far worse than the one behind her. The first time Caleb Walker heard her voice, it didn't come as a shout. It came as a whisper, raspy, wind-bitten, almost lost beneath the groan of the wire he was pulling taut between two cracked posts. He straightened slowly, breath rising in pale clouds, one gloved hand still gripping the pliers. The sky above him churned with thick gray, the kind that promised snow before sundown. He didn't expect anyone out here. No one ever came to the eastern fence line. That's why he liked it. "Please," she said again, louder now. "Please don't let them take my babies." Caleb turned. She was at the edge of the trees, stumbling, arms clutching two small bundles wrapped in what looked like saddle blankets. Blood ran from somewhere near her shoulder, dark and soaking through her faded blouse. She was filthy, her face streaked with mud, but her eyes, wide, frantic, green, locked onto his like they were her last chance. He didn't speak. Not right away. He dropped the pliers, crossed the distance in 3 long strides, and caught her just before she collapsed into the frozen grass. One of the bundles stirred and gave a weak cry. The other didn't move. Caleb's hands were strong but careful as he lowered her onto her knees, easing the children from her arms. "Easy," he muttered, finally breaking his silence. "You're all right. They're all right." "No," she choked, trying to sit back up. "They're coming. They'll find me. Please don't let them." Her body went limp before she finished the sentence. Caleb looked down at the bundles, heart pounding now, not from fear but something deeper, an old ache clawing its way back to the surface. The smaller one was no more than a few months old, face pale and barely breathing. The other, a girl maybe 4, maybe 5, blinked up at him, dazed but silent. She had the same green eyes. He stood slowly, one child in each arm, and looked back toward the tree line. Nothing yet, no riders, no dust, but someone had put that blood on her. Someone had driven her this far into nowhere. He couldn't leave her out here. The walk back to the cabin was long, longer than it should have been with the cold already creeping through his coat. Caleb's cabin sat tucked between 2 hills, sheltered and far from any road. He'd built it that way after the war, after Mara, after he'd buried more than just a wife. Inside, the hearth still burned low, the air thick with cedar smoke and silence. He kicked the door open gently and stepped into the warmth. He laid the woman on the cot near the fire, checked the wound. It was a graze, deep but clean. No bullet inside. The bleeding had slowed. The children he set on the bearskin rug. The girl didn't speak, just watched him with big, blinking eyes, fingers curled into her little brother's blanket. Caleb crouched in front of her, tried to keep his voice from cracking. "What's your name, sweetheart?" She didn't answer. He tried again, softer. "I'm Caleb, this here's my place. You're safe now, all right? No one's gonna hurt you." Still she said nothing, but her hand slipped into his, small and trembling. That was enough for now. He got water boiling, found clean cloth, and started tending to the woman's wound. She didn't wake, not yet, but her pulse was steady. Whoever she was, she'd fought hard to get here, and from the state of her hands, cut, bruised, raw, she'd been on the run a while. By evening the snow had started. Thick flakes drifted against the windows, muffling the world. Caleb fed the fire, set stew on to warm, and tried not to stare too long at the woman's sleeping face. She looked young, too young to be carrying 2 kids through the wild alone, and the way she clutched at nothing in her sleep, her fingers twitching, lips moving with words she wasn't saying, it didn't sit right. That night the girl finally spoke. They were sitting near the fire. Caleb had given her a small wooden horse to hold. Mara had carved it once, back when they thought they'd have a daughter. "My name's Sadie," she whispered. Caleb looked up from the stew. "Sadie, that's a pretty name." She nodded solemnly, clutching the toy. "Mama's name is June. That's my baby brother Eli." He smiled gently. "Good to meet you, Sadie." She didn't mean to steal it, Sadie said suddenly, voice cracking. She just needed it for the ride, but he said he'd shoot us. Mama said run, so we did. Caleb's spoon stopped midair. Who said he'd shoot you? Sadie's eyes went wide again. She shook her head hard. Can't say, Mama said don't. Caleb leaned back slowly, heart sinking. June had stolen something, and someone had come after her, hard. In the stillness of that night, with snow thick on the windows and the fire burning low, Caleb sat awake long after the children slept. His rifle leaned against the hearth. His eyes never left the door. Just before dawn, June woke with a start. She bolted upright, gasping, eyes wild, until they met his. Then she sagged against the pillow, clutching her side. You're all right, Caleb said softly. You made it. Her lips moved, dry and cracked. Where are they? Safe, warm, sleeping. Tears welled up instantly. She didn't let them fall. Caleb passed her water, and she drank it in desperate gulps. Then, when her breathing slowed, she looked at him like she wasn't sure if he was real. Why did you help me? Caleb didn't answer right away. He just looked at the children. I lost my family once, he said. Didn't feel right watching someone else lose theirs. June closed her eyes tight. They'll come, she whispered. He always does. He don't care about law, don't care about mercy, if he finds us. Who? She opened her eyes again, and the fear in them was something Caleb hadn't seen since the war. Wade Morrow, she breathed. The name meant nothing to Caleb, not yet. But he could see what it meant to her. He rose slowly, jaw tight, and added another log to the fire. Outside, the snow kept falling. But for the first time in a long time, Caleb Walker wasn't just trying to survive winter. He was preparing for war. The second morning came with no sunrise, just a dull gray light creeping beneath the clouds, thick and heavy as ash. Caleb stood at the cabin door, coffee steaming in his hands, eyes fixed on the white horizon. Tracks were already buried. Snow didn't fall anymore. It just hung, waiting, as if the world itself held its breath. Inside, June slept again, shallow and restless, her wound clean but slow to heal. Sadie sat on the floor by the fire with Eli curled in her lap, singing something tuneless and low, keeping him warm the only way she could. Caleb had offered to hold him once, but the look she gave him, quiet but fierce, had said everything. She'd already lost too much. He didn't ask again. Instead, he spent the morning checking the perimeter. The pasture fence held for now. The creek was frozen thick, no tracks beyond his own, but the unease settled deep and didn't shake loose. He'd seen it before ambushes, before raids, before everything turned to hell. It wasn't just fear for the girl and her children. It was that name, still echoing in the back of his head. Wade Morrow. He turned it over, tried to place it. It had the sound of someone used to taking. Someone who thought pain was just another form of speech. Caleb had known enough men like that, men who thought mercy was a weakness and justice just a word men in towns used to feel brave. When he came back to the cabin, June was sitting up, her back pressed to the wall, sweat sticking her hair to her face. The fire cast long, low shadows across her jaw, and her eyes were locked on Sadie and Eli like she'd already planned what to do if someone burst through the door. Caleb didn't speak. He just handed her another cup of water and sat on the bench across from her, stretching his legs toward the heat. They teach Sadie not to talk, he asked after a long silence. June gave a dry huff that might have been a laugh. She talks too much. Used to anyway. Now she just knows better than to tell strangers what she's seen. I ain't a stranger. June looked at him, not hostile, not warm, just measuring. Ain't a friend yet either. Caleb nodded slowly, fair. The fire crackled. Somewhere above them, the wind scratched against the roof like claws across old wood. She your only family? He asked quietly. June shook her head, then paused. She's all that's left. That was all she said, but it said everything. They fell into a routine, quiet and fragile. Caleb fed the stock chopped wood, boiled stew. Sadie helped where she could, always with Eli wrapped tight against her chest. June moved slow, favoring her side, but she started helping by the third day, stirring pots, sewing ripped blankets, sorting herbs from the root cellar, even when the pain made her clench her teeth. Caleb didn't stop her. She didn't want pity. What she wanted was to feel useful, grounded, to stop waiting. But waiting was all they could do. Because if Wade Morrow was coming, he'd do it on his own time, his own terms. And if June was right, he wouldn't care about the snow, the cold, or the distance. He'd come like a storm. That night Caleb was outside stacking wood when Sadie crept up beside him. She didn't say anything, just stood there staring out at the dark. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Mama don't sleep either." He nodded, lot on her mind. Sadie picked up a piece of kindling, turning it over in her hands. "Wade used to come to our farm. He'd bring candy, act nice." Caleb's spine stiffened. "He smiled a lot," she continued, "but Mama said his smiles were the kind that made her skin feel cold." "She was right," Caleb murmured. Sadie looked up at him. "He says Eli's his, says he's coming back for him, that's why Mama ran." Caleb exhaled slowly, the steam from his breath curling in front of his face. "He ain't getting him, not here." Sadie seemed to weigh that. Then she nodded like she'd decided to believe him. She handed him the stick of kindling and walked back inside. That night Caleb didn't sleep. He sat by the window with his rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the tree line, and when morning came, it brought more than snow. It brought the first sign. Just past noon, Sadie was helping June with the stew when Caleb came in, jaw tight, snow melting on his shoulders. He set a black object on the table, a glove, leather worn, the kind a man drops when he knows someone's close. June paled. "That his?" Caleb nodded once. "Fresh track just south of the ridge. One rider might be scouting." "He found us," June's voice broke. Caleb shook his head. "No, not yet, but he's near." For the first time since she'd arrived, June reached for his hand. "We can't run again. The snow, the kids." "You won't," he said. "You don't know him." "No," Caleb said quietly, "but I know men like him, and I've buried a few." She stared at him, the weight of that sentence settling between them. By dusk he had a plan. There was a hollow behind the barn, dug years ago as a root cellar, then abandoned. Caleb spent the night clearing it out, covering it with boards and snow. It wouldn't hold forever, but it'd give time. June helped where she could. Sadie stood guard with a wooden spoon like it was a sword. Caleb didn't correct her. The next morning the tracks doubled. 2 riders now, getting closer. They moved the children's things into the cellar. June kept her voice calm even when her hands shook. She made a game of it, packing supplies, folding quilts, tucking away a single candle and a match. She smiled for the children, but her eyes gave her away. She was unraveling, slow and quiet like a frayed rope. Caleb caught her outside, her back to the cabin, breathing hard against the cold. "You all right?" he asked. She shook her head. "No." He nodded. "Me neither." Then she turned and stepped into him, burying her face against his chest. He held her, not sure what to say, not needing to say anything. But when she looked up, her voice was steel again. "If something happens, if I can't, promise me you'll protect them." "I will." "Not just from him," she said, gripping his coat. "From what comes after, the shame, the weight. Don't let them grow up afraid of their name." He met her gaze. "They won't." She stepped back. "Then I'll do whatever it takes." That night Wade Morrow came. Not with shouting, not with a gun raised. He came with a whistle. Long, slow, familiar. June froze at the sound of it. She dropped the spoon in her hand and pressed her palm to her mouth. Sadie stood behind her, eyes wide. Eli started to cry. Caleb moved like lightning, snuffing the lamps, checking the rifle. He pushed June toward the trapdoor in the floor, whispering, "Stay low, don't speak, not a word." He shut the hatch just as the front door creaked open. A silhouette stepped inside, framed by snow and shadow. Tall, lean, smile already carved across his face. "Well," Wade Morrow said, brushing snow from his coat, "ain't this cozy?" Caleb leveled the rifle at his chest. "You're not welcome here." Wade's eyes flicked to the room, lazy. "You must be the fence fixer. She always had a talent for finding broken men." Caleb didn't move. Wade chuckled. "Where is she?" "Gone." Wade tusked, stepping further in. "Don't lie, son, it spoils the trust. See, I just want what's mine, and she took him." Caleb's voice was ice. "He was never yours." Wade's smile widened. "I think that's for the courts to decide." "Oh, wait, we're not near any courts out here, are we?" From below, the faintest cry rose through the floorboards. Wade's eyes lit up. "There they are." Caleb pulled the hammer back. Wade raised his hands, mock surrender. "You gonna shoot me in your own home, in front of your new family?" "You step forward," Caleb said, "and I'll make sure you never step again." A beat of silence passed. Then Wade smiled. "All right," he said. "You've got spine, I respect that, but spine's not enough." He turned and walked out the door. Just like that. Caleb stood frozen. And then in the distance a second whistle, then a third, echoes from the hills from every direction. He wasn't alone. He'd never been alone. The door shut with a soft click behind Wade Morrow, but the echoes of that damn whistle kept bleeding into the walls long after he'd vanished into the snow. Caleb stood rooted in place, rifle still raised, heart pounding so loud it nearly drowned out everything else. One whistle, then two, then three. They hadn't been close, just loud enough to be heard, to send a message. Wade hadn't come to take the boy tonight. He'd come to show Caleb exactly how little time they had left. Under the floor, June must have heard it all. But she didn't open the hatch, didn't cry out, didn't panic. She knew better. She knew men like Wade never moved without an audience, without spectacle. He was playing a long game, and he was playing it for blood. Caleb moved at last, stepping quietly to the trapdoor and rapping it twice. A second passed, then the panel shifted upward an inch. June's eyes met his in the dark. "He's not alone," Caleb said. "He's got men in the hills, at least 3, maybe more." June's face tightened, but she nodded. Sadie didn't cry. "Eli's quiet. We're all right." "For now," Caleb muttered. She opened the trapdoor wider, but he shook his head. "Not yet. He's not done. Might circle back. Stay down." Her eyes searched his. "You won't be able to fight them all." "No," he admitted, "but I won't have to. I just need to slow them down long enough to get you out. We've got nowhere to go. You've got me." He closed the hatch again, before she could say anything else. That night passed in pieces. Every creak of the wind made Caleb's fingers twitch toward the rifle. Every shadow outside the windows looked like movement. He slept in fits, boots on, coat buttoned, gun across his chest. He didn't tell June, but he moved the children's boots and coats next to the trapdoor, ready if they needed to run. By dawn, no sign of Wade or his men, no new tracks, but Caleb knew better than to believe in mercy. He'd seen how wolves hunted. They circled. They waited. They drove fear deep before they struck. June emerged from the cellar pale and silent. Sadie climbed out after her, clutching Eli tight. No one spoke of the whistles. No one had to. By noon, June was sharpening knives at the table while Caleb reinforced the windows with timber planks. They didn't talk much, just worked, moving around each other like 2 gears in a clock, turning toward the inevitable. "There's a path west of the ridge," Caleb said, nailing a board across the back door. "Old smuggler route, tight and steep but covered, if we need to run." "We won't," June interrupted. He turned to look at her. "I won't run again," she said, not looking up from the blade in her hands. "Not with them, not anymore. You may not get a choice." She met his gaze, jaw tight. "I already made mine." And that was the end of it. That afternoon, the first real sign came. Sadie spotted him, a shadow by the tree line far beyond the pasture, a man on horseback, just watching, then another half a ridge over pretending to scan for game. They weren't advancing, they were closing in, tightening the loop. Wade wasn't just playing at fear, he was starving them with it. By dusk, Caleb had counted 5. One of them left a dead rabbit strung up on the fence. No note, just blood. June buried it without a word. That night the cold returned with a vengeance. Ice crawled up the windows and the wind howled low and strange. Caleb took first watch, then June, then Caleb again, though neither really slept. At one point near midnight, Caleb walked the perimeter with a lantern. He found boot prints leading up to the barn door. Fresh. He followed them back to the field and found nothing but churned snow. They were testing him, gauging his nerves. He wished they'd come already. At least then he'd know what kind of death they had planned. But Wade didn't want blood yet. He wanted surrender, wanted June to hand over the boy, hand herself over and crawl. He'd underestimated the fire left in her. On the 4th morning, Caleb came in with frost still clinging to his beard and said one word: smoke. They ran to the front window. A mile off near the old creek, black smoke curled into the sky, too far to be a threat, too close to ignore. "What is it?" Sadie asked, clutching Eli. "A message," Caleb murmured. "From who?" "Someone who thinks fire speaks louder than bullets." June didn't blink, let him scream. Still the smoke didn't stop. By midday more had joined it, 3 plumes, then 4. "They're trying to smoke us out," Caleb said, "or draw us in." "You're not going," June said flatly. "If I don't, he'll keep lighting fires until one gets close enough to jump the trees. Then we burn together." "No," Caleb slung the rifle over his shoulder. "You stay here. You hear gunshots, you run, cellar first, ridge second." June's voice cracked. "Don't do this." "I'm not going to fight him," Caleb said quietly. "I'm going to talk." June laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "He doesn't talk, he lies, then he hurts, that's all." Caleb opened the door. "Then I'll lie better." She grabbed his coat hard. Her eyes flared with something raw and pleading. "If he kills you," she whispered, "I won't know how to keep them safe." Caleb looked down at her hand, then at her. "I'm not dying today." She let go. He found them near the 3rd fire. They hadn't expected him to ride alone. He came without his rifle raised, without a weapon drawn, just his horse and the truth. Wade was there, standing in the middle of the burned brush, coat open, grin easy. "Well, look at you," he said. "Figured you'd come eventually. Good men always think they can reason with wolves." "I didn't come to reason," Caleb replied. "I came to warn." Wade chuckled. "Is that right? You don't want to do this." "Oh, but I do," Wade said, stepping closer. "See, what your little runaway forgot to tell you is I got legal claim. Boy's mine. Bastard or not, I paid for him, fed him, carried his name. She took something from me, and I always collect." "She took herself," Caleb said. "That's not theft, that's survival." Wade's grin twisted. "She's a liar, a whore. She lied about his blood." "You believe that and still call him yours?" "Course I do. He was mine to break." The words came easy for Wade. No shame, no mask. Caleb didn't flinch. "If you come for them, I'll kill you." "You think you're the first man said that to me?" Wade asked, stepping even closer. "You think you scare me? You've got one rifle, no men, and a little patch of dirt you hide behind like it means something." "It means something to them." Wade smirked. "They'll be orphans before the week's out." "Then you better come tonight," Caleb said coldly, "because I won't wait past tomorrow." Wade's smile dropped for the first time. "You don't get to set terms, rancher." "I just did." Then Caleb turned his horse and rode. He didn't look back, not even when Wade shouted after him, voice full of venom. Next time I come, I burn everything." When he got back, June was waiting outside, gun in her lap, eyes rimmed with sleepless red. "Tell me," she said. Caleb dismounted. "He's coming tonight or tomorrow. And I made him mad." June blinked. "Good." They spent the next hours preparing. No more hiding. They reinforced the trapdoor, set oil by the porch, loaded every gun. Caleb taught June how to fire the rifle without bruising her shoulder. She didn't miss once. Sadie watched it all with the eyes of someone who'd already lost a childhood. She held Eli and whispered to him, over and over, "Mom is strong. Mom is strong. Mom is strong." Caleb watched them through the window and felt something shift in his chest. He hadn't just made a promise. He'd found something worth dying for again. That night the wind died, the snow stopped, the world went still. The cabin glowed faint and warm in the dark. And out in the trees, the shadows began to move. The silence was the first sign, a stillness so total it rang in the ears, louder than any gunshot. No crickets, no owls, no groan of the trees, just the weight of snow pressing down on every limb and rooftop like the world had stopped breathing. Caleb stood just inside the door with his rifle propped against the wall and a kerosene lamp burning low. He didn't light more. He wanted Wade to wonder what waited inside, wanted the dark to feel like teeth. The children were in the cellar beneath the floorboards, wrapped in quilts and silence. Caleb had rigged a second hatch, one that led through a tunnel to the far side of the barn. If things went bad, June could slip them out the back while he made sure no one followed. He checked his pocket watch. Midnight, no movement. June sat at the table, eyes sharp and jaw clenched, a shotgun across her lap. She hadn't said much since sunset. Neither had he. The kind of quiet they shared now didn't need filling. It was the kind forged under pressure, when you're counting heartbeats instead of words. A faint crunch. Then another. Boots on snow. Caleb didn't move. He just raised a hand to June and mouthed the word, "Now." She moved without sound, crossed to the corner, lifted the rug, opened the hatch. One last look at him, one last heartbeat, then she disappeared below, sealing the panel shut behind her. More footsteps. Then a voice outside, smooth as oil. "Evenin', rancher, that fire's still warm." Caleb stepped forward and cracked the door just wide enough to be seen. Wade stood 10 feet away, flanked by 3 men, all armed, all grinning. Behind them, faint flickers of torchlight moved between the trees. "Didn't think you'd come so soon," Caleb said calmly. "I figured waiting was rude," Wade replied, shifting his weight. "Thought we'd keep it civil. You hand 'em over, we ride out. Nobody bleeds." Caleb stepped outside and shut the door behind him. The wind kissed his neck, sharp and cruel. "They're gone," he said. Wade's smile vanished. "You're lying." "Ridge Trail took off an hour ago." Wade looked at the snow, untouched, pristine. "No tracks," he said. "Snow-covered 'em fast." Wade narrowed his eyes. "You expect me to believe you let a woman and 2 brats wander off in the dark?" Caleb shrugged. "Better than watching them die." One of Wade's men shifted his grip on the rifle. Tension wound tight like barbed wire. Caleb didn't blink. He could feel the door at his back, feel the weight of the cabin behind him. He'd fortified it, sure, but it wouldn't hold long, and once they pushed past him. No. He couldn't let it come to that. Wade stepped forward, his coat flapping slightly in the wind. "You're a stubborn man, Walker, but I'm starting to think you ain't too smart." "Been called worse." Wade leaned in just slightly. "I'm not here for pride. I'm not here to prove anything. I just want the boy, that's all. You hand him over and I won't tear this place apart." "He's not yours," Caleb said, low and final. Wade's jaw tightened. "I paid for him," he snapped. "You don't buy people," Caleb growled. Wade laughed. "This world's built on people being bought." He turned, walked a few paces away. then stopped. "Last chance, rancher. Open the door, fetch the kid, or we come in and take him." Caleb didn't answer. Wade gave a nod. The first shot came from the tree line. Caleb dove left, rolled behind the water trough as bullets ripped through the porch. Splinters flew. He returned fire 2 quick rounds, and one of Wade's men screamed, dropping to his knees. Chaos exploded like dry kindling. Guns barked, fire roared, horses screamed from somewhere near the barn. Inside the cabin, the children stayed hidden. The floor above them trembled with each footstep, each gunshot. June held Eli tight in one arm and a pistol in the other, her jaw clenched as dust trickled from the beams above. Outside, Caleb moved like a ghost, circling wide, using the snow and the dark to his advantage. He caught the second man trying to flank the shed and dropped him with a shot to the shoulder. The man screamed, stumbled, then went still. The third man charged toward the porch, shouting for Wade. Caleb caught him just before the door, slammed the butt of the rifle into his temple. He crumpled without a sound. Wade stood alone now, breathing hard, coat ripped, pistol smoking. He looked around, saw his men on the ground, and bared his teeth. "You think this is over?" he roared. Caleb raised the rifle again, eyes locked on him. "You don't get to come back from this," Wade growled. "Not once I'm done with you." Caleb said nothing. "Where is she?" Wade demanded, stepping forward. "Where's June?" "Gone," Caleb repeated. "Liar," Wade screamed and fired. The bullet tore through Caleb's shoulder. He staggered back, grunting, rifle dropping into the snow. Wade advanced, another round ready. But then, boom! The shotgun blast blew through the door behind Wade. Wood shattered. Wade spun, eyes wide. June stepped out of the cabin, teeth gritted, smoke curling from the barrel. "I said don't let them take my babies," she growled. Wade turned his gun toward her. Too slow. Caleb's knife hit him square in the gut. Wade gasped, dropped his pistol, staggered to his knees. Blood poured from his mouth. Caleb limped over, one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder, the other reaching down to retrieve his rifle. Wade coughed once, a wet choking sound. "I had a right," he wheezed. "You had a choice," Caleb said, "and you made it." Wade tried to laugh, but no sound came. He slumped into the snow and stopped moving. Silence returned. Only now it felt different. It took Caleb 10 minutes to bind his shoulder, another 20 to drag the bodies away from the cabin and into the grove beyond the fence. The children never saw them. Sadie stayed curled around Eli in the cellar, eyes wide and dry. June came down herself to tell them it was over. She didn't cry, not then. She waited until both children were asleep, then stepped outside to find Caleb sitting on the porch steps, pale and tired, eyes fixed on the horizon. "You should be resting," she said. "I will." He didn't look at her. She sat beside him. For a long time neither spoke. "Then you didn't have to stay." Caleb turned to her. "I did." June exhaled slowly. "He would have killed you." "I've been killed before," he said, voice flat. "Didn't take." Her eyes welled. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this." "I'm not," he said. She stared at him. "You saved them," she whispered. He shook his head. "You did that." She looked down at her hands, still shaking slightly. "I didn't shoot to kill." "You didn't have to." He stood slowly, swaying just a little. "I'll bury him in the morning," he said. June rose too, her voice trembling now. "What happens now?" Caleb met her eyes. "That's your call." He turned to go inside. But June reached out and caught his hand. Not with fear, not with desperation. Just with hope. "I'd like to stay," she said softly, "if that's all right." Caleb didn't speak. He just squeezed her hand once. And for the first time in years, the cabin door closed not against danger, but behind something worth protecting. The sun rose over the ridge like a reluctant apology. Pale and cold, its light spilled across a landscape scarred by the night before, shell casings half buried in snow, tracks muddied by blood, smoke still trailing faintly from the brush where torches had burned too close. Caleb stood alone in the grove behind the barn, digging. One grave, then another. His shoulder throbbed with every motion, but he didn't stop. Couldn't. The sooner they were in the ground, the sooner the soil could forget them. June stood by the fence, arms crossed, hair loose around her shoulders. She hadn't said a word since she brought him coffee at dawn, just watched. Watched him work, watched the crows circle, watched the steam curl off the mug in her hands until the wind stole it away. The children were inside, safe, asleep, she hoped. When Caleb finished, he wiped his brow with a shaking hand and stared down at the two shallow mounds. He hadn't marked the graves, didn't see the point. They'd marked themselves enough in life. He turned to find June behind him. "You should be resting," she said softly, echoing her own words from the night before. "So should you." She didn't smile, not yet. He looked back toward the house. They sleep through it. She nodded. Sadie woke once, asked if the bad men were gone. I told her yes. "And did she believe you?" "I don't think it mattered." They stood in silence a moment. Caleb's hand flexed at his side. The wound was wrapped tight under his shirt, but the bandage had already bled through. He wouldn't admit it, but he was dizzy. He could feel it in the way the world tilted slightly when he blinked too long. "Come on," June said gently, stepping closer. "Let me change it." Inside, the cabin smelled like warmth again. Fire, bread, pine, safety. The trapdoor had been left ajar, as if the cellar no longer needed to be hidden. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed while June unwound the blood-stained cloth. Her fingers were gentle, practiced. Caleb wondered if she'd done this before for her husband, maybe, before things went wrong. "How deep?" she asked. "Clean through, missed the bone." "Lucky." He grunted, didn't feel lucky. She looked up at him as she dabbed the wound with warm water. "You didn't have to take a bullet for us." "I didn't take it for you." Her hands paused. "I took it because he would have aimed lower next." June blinked, then resumed dressing the wound. "He would have. He wanted to kill something, make a point. He always did." She finished the bandage and leaned back. "There. Thank you." She didn't answer right away, just watched him. "You're not what I expected," she said finally. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "What'd you expect?" "A man who wouldn't open his door." He chuckled dryly. "I almost didn't." "I know." June's voice softened. "But you did." He met her eyes. "You knocked." The days that followed passed in uneasy stillness. No more whistles, no more torches, no more riders in the hills. Wade's absence felt too quiet, like the forest was holding its breath, but no one came. Caleb moved slower now, favoring his left side. June insisted on doing the heavy lifting, fetching water, chopping kindling, tending the livestock with Sadie clinging to her hip and Eli strapped to her back. She moved with a tired grace, like someone too used to working through pain. He watched her sometimes from the porch, wondering how long she'd lived that way, carrying burdens no one could see. On the third day, a letter arrived. No rider, no footprints, just a folded paper tucked under the gate. Caleb spotted it while hauling feed. He opened it slowly. "You made a mistake. He wasn't alone, he was just the mouthpiece. You killed the wrong man, he answered to someone else. You'll be hearing from them soon." No signature, no warning, just a final line scribbled fast, almost an afterthought. "Tell the woman she still owes." He crumpled the letter and burned it before June could see. But he couldn't hide the weight in his eyes. That night, after the children had gone quiet and the fire burned low, June stepped onto the porch and found Caleb sitting with his head in his hands. She didn't ask. She just sat beside him. He handed her a cup of coffee without a word. She sipped, then asked softly, "What did the letter say?" Caleb froze. June glanced at him. "I saw it in the fire, the ash blew wrong." He exhaled. "It said we're not done." June nodded slowly. "I figured. Wade was working for someone else." She closed her eyes. "Then it won't stop." "No." A long pause. "Then what do we do?" Caleb looked out over the land. "We prepare. And if it's not enough." He turned to her, face worn but steady. "Then we make it enough." June nodded once. "All right." She stood and moved back toward the door. But before she stepped inside, she paused. "You're not alone in this," she said without turning. "Not anymore." Then she disappeared into the warmth. And Caleb let himself believe, for 1 minute, that maybe, just maybe, that would matter. Over the next week, they transformed the ranch. Caleb showed June how to use a hammer, how to set traps, how to lay signals between trees with wire and tin. She taught him how to read prints in the snow, how to move without sound. The children learned too, Sadie with her ears always alert, Eli with his uncanny quiet. They didn't speak of the letter again, but they moved like people bracing for a storm. It came 10 days later. Not with whistles, not with fire, but with a man in black. He arrived on foot, alone, no horse, no noise, just appeared at the edge of the pasture near dusk. Caleb saw him from the porch and knew instantly he wasn't like the others. Too still, too calm. The man stopped 30 paces from the fence and waited. Caleb stepped off the porch and approached slowly. "You Wade's replacement?" he asked. "No," the man said. "Wade was noise. I'm the hand that moves the board." "What do you want?" The man smiled faintly. "A debt paid that woman June. She broke contract. She ran from a man who beat her." "She ran from an agreement," the man corrected. "One made in blood." Caleb's grip tightened on his rifle. "That agreement's burned." The man's eyes narrowed. "Are you prepared to die for her?" he asked. Caleb didn't hesitate. Already did, just waiting on the paperwork. The man's smile vanished. He turned without a word and walked away. That night they doubled the traps. June found Caleb by the fire, staring at a knife he hadn't touched in hours. "You know who he was?" she asked. "No, but I know what he is." "Which is?" "A man who thinks law, whatever he says it is." She sat beside him. "What if they come with papers?" she asked. "With men wearing badges?" "Then we prove paper ain't thicker than bone." She looked at him, startled. "You'd go that far?" Caleb looked back. "You would." June didn't answer. She didn't have to. 2 nights later they came. Not like raiders, like a procession. 4 men, 1 woman, all in black. No horses, just boots, badges, and silence. They walked up the path slow, like they had all the time in the world. Caleb and June stood on the porch, rifles ready. The woman spoke first. "We've come for the child." "No," June said. The woman's voice didn't rise. "You were bought, you were owned, you ran. I lived. You broke a blood deal. I bled for it. Then bleed again." The first shot rang out before Caleb could react. The shot cracked through the dusk like a thunderclap, sending birds shrieking from the trees and snow tumbling from the cabin's eaves. Caleb didn't wait. He dove left off the porch, rolled behind the chopping stump, and returned fire in a single motion. June was already down, rifle braced across the porch railing, eyes fixed through the iron sights. The bullet hadn't hit either of them, hadn't been meant to. It struck the top post of the fence, splintering it clean in two. A warning, a declaration. They weren't just taking the child. They were coming for everything. The black-coated figures advanced without urgency, stepping over the shattered fence rail like it meant nothing. Snow whispered under their boots, but their eyes never blinked, never darted. No yelling, no rushing, just steady, calculated movement. 4 men. One woman, all carrying rifles but none raised yet. Caleb had faced off with outlaws before, seen plenty of men think themselves untouchable, but this was different. These weren't desperate. These were professionals. Hired blades with something colder than greed driving them. June's voice came like flint beside him. They're not bounty hunters. I know. They're cleaner than Wade's lot, controlled. Too controlled. June adjusted her aim. That woman, the one speaking, she looked at me like she knew my whole story. She probably does. June swallowed hard. She's not gonna care about yours. Caleb sighted down the barrel. She should. They didn't shoot, not yet. They just moved forward 5 yards at a time like time itself was theirs to command. Behind Caleb, inside the cabin, Sadie crouched in the hallway near the cellar door, arms around Eli. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just listened. Waited. Her tiny shoulders trembling under the wool shawl June had wrapped her in. The leader, the woman in black, stopped a dozen feet from the porch. Her voice cut through the cold, sharp and clean. There are 2 options here. One ends with quiet, the other ends with fire. The debt was blood-bound. She knew the terms. June stood slowly, rifle still pointed. Then you know I left for a reason. The woman's gaze didn't flicker. You left because you were weak. You stayed gone because you were selfish. Now we're here because you're dangerous. June's knuckles tightened. Dangerous to who? To the order of things. The last word hadn't left her mouth before Caleb fired. His shot hit the ground at her feet, kicking up a spray of ice and dirt. You want fire, he said low. Try stepping forward. The woman's eyes shifted to him, measured, unimpressed. Then she raised her hand. The men fanned out. June whispered, they're gonna flank. I know. Caleb reached behind him, flicked the fuse on the line of wire he'd strung through the brush 3 days ago. A split second later, a hidden jar of lamp oil and sawdust exploded in a blaze beside the barn. It wasn't meant to kill, just blind, distract, buy time. The figures scattered for cover. Caleb grabbed June's arm. Go get them to the tunnel. She didn't argue, just ran, disappearing inside the cabin as Caleb reloaded and took aim again. Another shot. One of the blackcoats had moved too fast, too cocky. Caleb's bullet tore through his thigh, dropping him hard. 3 left, plus the woman. June ripped the rug back, opened the hatch, and helped Sadie climb in. The girl didn't ask questions, just clung to Eli and dropped into the darkness. June followed, grabbing the shotgun before closing the hatch behind her. She could hear the gunfire now, closer, sharper. They crawled fast through the narrow passage beneath the house, the dirt walls pressing close on either side. Caleb had dug it years ago, after losing his wife, thinking maybe one day he'd need a way out. He hadn't imagined it'd be for someone else's children. Outside, Caleb ducked behind the water barrel as bullets punched holes through the porch. He was bleeding again, shoulder torn open from a ricochet, but he didn't feel it. Not yet. Not when the woman was still standing calmly behind the line of fire, untouched. He gritted his teeth and sprinted for the barn. Behind him, he heard footsteps on the porch. One of the blackcoats had circled back. He hit the door hard, wood splintering under his boots. Too late. They were gone. Inside the tunnel, June pressed forward, one hand on Sadie's back, the other cradling Eli against her chest. The air was tight, dry, packed with Caleb's scent, sweat, wood, tobacco. She wondered if this was what he'd smelled like the day he buried his wife. The thought gripped her hard, nearly stole her breath, but she pushed on. The tunnel opened beneath the floor of the old smokehouse, 100 feet behind the barn. Hidden, safe for now. She lifted the hatch, eased the children out, then climbed up herself, shotgun still in hand. Her heart beat like hooves against her ribs. Stay here, she whispered. Sadie grabbed her coat. Where's Mr. Caleb? June didn't answer. She turned toward the barn. Caleb had holed up in the hayloft, rifle aimed through the slats, tracking the 3 remaining men. One was circling the rear, the second crouched near the trough, the third inside the cabin now, searching. The woman stood unmoved, watching it all like a chess game. Caleb fired. Another man dropped, chest hit clean. 2 left. Then the hay exploded beside his head. He rolled hard, tumbled down through the trapdoor, hitting the barn floor with a grunt. Wind knocked out, vision swimming. He reached for his rifle, but it was gone, slid into the shadows. A shadow moved ahead of him. Then a voice. "I liked Wade, you made this personal." The man stepped forward, gun raised. And then, boom! June's shotgun blew him back into the wall. He slammed into a support beam and collapsed, blood spreading fast. Caleb stared at her. "Thought I told you to stay hidden." June helped him up. "Thought you told me we're not doing this alone." They looked toward the field. The woman remained. Only her. She didn't run, didn't retreat. She walked slowly to the center of the yard and waited. Caleb stepped out of the barn, rifle in hand. June walked beside him. "I don't care who you work for," he called. "I don't care what you think," she replied. June raised her voice. "It's over." The woman tilted her head. "You think it ends here. The boy's worth more than you know. And she," her eyes cut to June, "belongs to something bigger than a barn and a bleeding man." Caleb's voice dropped. "She belongs to these children." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You'll die for this." June stepped forward. "We already said we would." There was no signal. No drawn weapon. Just one final standoff. Then the woman turned and walked. Not away, but toward the trees. Caleb did lower his gun, but he didn't fire. And she vanished into the forest without another word. It was another hour before the quiet settled in. Another day before Caleb could move without leaning. Another week before Sadie smiled again. They buried the dead behind the grove, same as Wade's men, unmarked, unnamed. The soil didn't care who they'd been. The cabin was patched, the barn repaired. The wounds, well, those took longer. But June stayed. Every morning she fed the chickens, humming under her breath. Every afternoon, Caleb found her reading aloud to Sadie from an old tattered book while Eli cooed in her lap. At night, when the sky burned orange and the fields turned to gold, they sat on the porch without speaking. Sometimes she leaned her shoulder into his. Sometimes he let her. And when the snow finally melted and the hills bloomed green again, Caleb rebuilt the fence. This time, June helped drive every nail. They didn't talk about the letter that never came, or the silence that followed. But every time the wind shifted or a bird startled too suddenly, they looked up just to be sure. Because safety, they'd learned, wasn't a place. It was a promise. And they'd made it. Together. Spring came slow, like a skittish colt, creeping down from the hills in tentative bursts of green. The frost clung to the corners of windows until midday, but the air carried something softer now. Birdsong, the trickle of thawed streams, the scent of pine no longer buried beneath ice. Caleb Morgan stood with one foot balanced on a fence rail, hammer idle in his hand, watching the trail beyond the ridge as if waiting for something to rise from it. It had been 33 days since the woman in black vanished into the trees, 33 days since the last shot was fired. The earth hadn't forgotten yet. He still found scorched roots, stray shells buried shallow, bloodstains in places even rain couldn't wash clean. But the quiet was holding. That counted for something. Behind him, June knelt in the garden beside the cabin, sleeves rolled past her elbows, dark curls tucked behind her ears. Sadie sat nearby with a handful of twine, looping it around 2 wooden posts like she'd seen Caleb do. Eli lay dozing on a blanket in the sun, his breath barely a whisper. It was a strange thing, peace. Not loud, not sudden. It didn't arrive like thunder. It just stopped the noise. Caleb drove the last nail into place and lowered his hammer. The new fence line was taller now, reinforced, not because he thought it would stop bullets, but because it gave him something to do with his hands. You couldn't guard forever, but you could prepare. You could hold your line, especially when the stakes wore names like Sadie and Eli. He turned to see June watching him. She hadn't said much about what happened, not about the tunnel or the woman or the blood on her hands. She hadn't needed to. Caleb understood. There were things people carried in silence because saying them out loud gave them weight. He carried his own share. She rose and dusted her palms. Fence looked straight. Caleb nodded, just about. Storm season's coming. Noticed. June stepped closer, brushing hair from her face. You thinking of leaving? He didn't answer right away, just looked past her toward the woods, thought about it. And I'd rather stay. That was the first time he'd said it out loud. June didn't smile, but her shoulders eased a little. The soil's thawing could plant something. Could you ever grow beans? Not on purpose. That earned him the smallest smile, quick and soft. Inside, Sadie's laughter rang through the window, followed by Eli's delighted squeal. The cabin's walls, which had once echoed with emptiness, now pulsed with life again. It had taken blood and fire and loss to get there. But they were building something, inch by inch. Caleb wiped sweat from his brow and turned toward the porch. June followed. She handed him a tin cup of water, and they drank in companionable silence. Then a sound broke the stillness. Not a whistle, not boots, not thunder. Wheels. Wooden heavy. A wagon. Caleb set down his cup slowly. June's hand drifted to her hip. They stepped off the porch together, eyes fixed on the rise. It wasn't until the wagon cleared the ridge that they exhaled. An old man sat atop it, reins loose in hand, mule plodding slow. Dust coated the wheels. The canvas flapped gently in the wind. A woman sat beside him, gray hair tied in a kerchief, rifle across her lap more out of habit than fear. They looked worn but unarmed. Not trouble, just travelers. Caleb stepped forward. You folks lost. The man raised a hand. Looking for a place called Morgan's Hill. That still mean anything out here? Caleb blinked, used to. The old man smiled faintly. Used to be it meant safety. Heard rumor someone up this way opened his doors last month, took in a girl and her babies, turned away a whole storm. June stepped beside Caleb. What do you want? The woman on the wagon spoke. Sanctuary, a place to rest. We got coin, food. We can pull our weight, just need a season to breathe. Caleb studied them. Their eyes weren't sharp like bounty men. Their hands didn't rest near hidden pistols. He looked at June. She looked at the children. Then she nodded. Stables are empty, Caleb said. Cabin down by the stream needs a roof, but it'll keep you dry. The old man tipped his hat. That's more than we expected. June murmured, it's enough. The wagon rumbled down the trail. By the end of the week, there were 5 new mouths on the land. The couple, Ellis and Mary, had once run a supply shop down in Dry Creek before raiders burned it out. They'd been drifting ever since. The children, 2 brothers named Abram and Luke, helped mend the smokehouse. Their mother, Alma, cooked stew that reminded June of home before the bruises and the long nights. And so the house filled. The land worked harder. And Caleb found himself listening for sounds that didn't come, whistles, hooves, voices calling debts, but nothing returned. Until the letter. It came folded inside a grain sack. No ink, just burned words along the edge of parchment. You think this ends in dirt. You've made a stand, so did the Almonts. They're all buried now. We come slow, but we come. No name, no seal. But June knew the handwriting. Her hand trembled as she passed it to Caleb. It's him. Caleb unfolded it, stared at the blackened script. He didn't speak for a long time. When he did, his voice was calm. "Then we get ready." They doubled the fence, moved the children into the central cabin, rebuilt the tunnel with new exits. Ellis taught them how to layer stone in the walls for insulation. Mary planted herbs with June and hung wild garlic in the windows. Alma taught Sadie how to hide blades in doll dresses. Caleb patrolled at dawn and dusk, not because he thought they'd hold off forever, but because they'd hold off long enough. The first rider came on a rain-heavy morning. He didn't dismount, just stood at the edge of the property, coat dripping, rifle across his back. Caleb met him halfway. "You Morgan." "I am." The rider pulled a rolled paper from his coat. "Eviction notice." "On what grounds?" "Land claimed by the Holland Syndicate now." Caleb folded his arms. "They ever step foot on it?" "Don't matter." "It does here." The rider looked him over. "You plan to fight syndicate law." "I plan to live on my land." "Then you got 3 days." He turned, rode off. 3 days. The night before the third day, they gathered in the main cabin. 11 people, 1 fire. June sat beside Caleb, fingers laced with his beneath the table. She didn't say she was scared. She didn't need to. Her grip said enough. Caleb spoke to the room. "You don't have to stay. If they come, it won't be clean, won't be quiet." Ellis shook his head. "I buried too many good people to run again." Alma's voice was clear. "We stay." Mary poured more coffee. "Their bedding will break, let's not." June looked at Caleb. "You opened the door when I knocked. You said we'd hold the line." "I meant it." Then no one spoke for a while. The fire crackled. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt not alone, but surrounded. Not just defending something, but part of something worth defending. Morning came with fog and silence. No birds, no wind. Then hoofbeats. 10 riders. Badges pinned to their coats, but none legal. Syndicate men. Behind them, 2 wagons, one bearing chains. Caleb stood at the gate. Rifle slung, hat low. June stood behind him, shotgun resting easy in her arms. Sadie peeked through the shutters. The lead man, tall and sunburned, stepped down. "You got children in there, Morgan." "I do." "Then don't make us drag this out." June stepped forward. "We're not giving them up. They don't belong to you. They don't belong to you either." The man's smile vanished. Then he raised his hand. 10 rifles lifted. And the last stand of Morgan's Hill began. It began with silence. The syndicate men stood at the fence, 10 deep, rifles drawn, boots sinking into thawed mud. At their center, the woman in black dismounted slowly, her eyes fixed not on Caleb or June, but the cabin behind them, where Eli lay breathing in a fever, and Sadie waited with a hand over his chest like she could hold the world still. "You made your choice," the woman said, "but you're guarding something you don't understand." June's jaw tightened. "He's not yours to understand." Caleb stepped forward, one hand resting on his rifle. "If you came to talk, you're late. If you came to fight, be sure." The woman didn't flinch. "He's not a child, he's a key." "Then lock yourself out," June snapped. The woman gave a single signal. The line surged. Gunfire tore through the fog. The land screamed. Alma fired through the front window, Ellis from the barn. Abram swung down from the loft with a pistol in both hands. The children were hidden below, behind the trapdoor, but Eli stirred, sweat shining on his skin. The fever climbed. His breath shuddered. Sadie touched his cheek. "Please," she whispered, "don't let them take us." And something shifted. Not noise. Stillness. A pulse like thunder with no sound rolling outward from the boy. Lamps burst, glass shattered, rifles jammed in their attackers' hands. The earth itself hummed. One by one, the riders froze, stunned. The woman in black sank to one knee. Her eyes widened, not with rage but fear. And then it was over. Smoke lifted. Gun barrels cooled. Silence fell. The woman stood slowly, eyes never leaving the cabin. She mounted, turned, and rode away without a word. None of them ever came back. Later, they would try to name what Eli had done, but no name fit. He was still just a child, but the land around him knew better. It grew quieter now, gentler, and Morgan's Hill remained. Fences stood. The barn was rebuilt. And on summer evenings, June and Caleb sat on the porch, Sadie asleep on Caleb's lap, Eli nestled against June, his breath soft. "Do you think it's over?" she asked. "No," Caleb said, "but I think we're ready." They didn't need to understand what Eli was. They only needed to remember who he was. The boy June had fought for. The child who stopped the storm. The son they all protected, and who had protected them. Not just survivors. Not just protectors. Family. And this time, no one was going to take them.